Do you know how in just a month, a strong and successful young man can turn into a nervous and thin paranoid? No. And I'll tell you. It all started last month with another seemingly harmless trend in one of the social networks. Its essence was that it was necessary to call the intercom of the apartment or the apartment itself and by any means try to either enter the entrance, or simply lure the owner of the apartment into the stairwell under the camera's sight. Say it's not funny? I agree with you. Only a huge number of children find it funny and are happy to repeat such trends. I don't live in the biggest city, so all the new products reach us with a delay of a couple of months, for sure. However, unfortunately, this time the internet has unleashed this trend too quickly, as a result of which it has reached us. Oh, what then began in the city? There were about 10 high-rise buildings in the whole city where there were intercoms, respectively. All the children of the city called these high-rise buildings almost around the clock, from which the owners took off the intercoms and led them to hell. The first problems began about a month later, when, as an election campaign, the mayoral candidate installed intercoms in all apartment buildings over 2 floors. Then the GOP companies became interested in the new trend, which now had their way to the entrances cut off, where they mostly gathered. Some especially enterprising fellows even lured the owners out of the apartments, shamed and robbed. Soon, law enforcement agencies became interested in all this, and in the shortest possible time, namely, as soon as several pranksters were attracted, all the pranks stopped. It would seem that everything, happy end, you can celebrate and drink champagne, but no, not everything was so simple. A rumor spread around the city that someone was ringing the intercom at night, so persistently, and if you didn't let them in, then they began to sing songs under the windows, but such that a person almost went crazy. The neighbors really don't hear anything, but each victim claims that there were songs. Those who let the night guest into the entrance met a terrible fate. People were found dead near the open doors. Their faces were distorted by a grimace of horror, and their bodies were covered with ulcers, as if from burns. Naturally, for the most part, people were skeptical about this bike. Well, they say, what kind of night maniac singer is walking around the city? Nonsense. Yes, but there were more and more rumors. Then an acquaintance heard from him, then a man from a neighbor's brother on the train died like that. In general, all the information that came through was passed through several people, and accordingly, looked little like the truth. Something similar to the childhood game of Soviet children, namely a broken phone. I was also among those who were extremely skeptical, but literally one night changed everything. The day was the most ordinary. I returned from work and having dinner prepared to go to bed, when suddenly my intercom rang. Here it is necessary to make a small digression and explain the design feature of our house. I lived in a 4-story building of revolutionary years of construction, and due to the fact that the house was plastered with cornices, facades, and other things, the residents could not see the entrance to the entrance. Therefore, the management company installed additional equipment for us free of charge, namely a video intercom, an extremely useful thing, so as not to let any punks and Gapoda into the entrance. So, I'm coming up to the intercom screen, but there's no one on the camera, it's empty. It should be noted here that the camera has a very large viewing angle, so no one could stand somewhere to the left or right. Attributing everything to the next stupid jokes of the kids, I calmly went on about my business, when suddenly, after about 15 minutes, the intercom rang again. This time I almost ran to the screen, but it was empty. Mentally swearing at the pranksters, I remained standing at the screen, hoping to catch the night hooligans in my field of vision. But to my surprise, they seemed to feel that I was standing at the screen, because the calls stopped abruptly, or maybe they were just tired. Why did I decide that there were several of them? Yes, the devil knows. It is unlikely that someone would walk alone at night and call the intercoms. Hoping that the pranksters had finally calmed down, with a calm soul I went towards the bed, but as soon as I touched my head to the pillow, the intercom rang again. Starting to boil slowly, I made my way to the intercom in a few jumps and glanced at the screen, expecting to see a void there. However, this time there was no image at all. The screen turned black, as if someone had covered the camera. Here are the freaks. They thought of closing the camera with something, I thought, and, freaking out, picked up the phone. Perhaps I used all my vocabulary to explain to the pranksters that calling at night is wrong and not accepted, and that I am very unhappy with their actions. When I finished my monologue, there was silence for 15 seconds, and then a voice was heard in the speakers, "Let me in." Cursing, I sent the speaker to hell and dropped the call. However, it is not clear who was stubborn and apparently had the goal of getting through to me at any cost, because the calls continued for about 5 minutes, and when I again accepted the call, a voice repeated the same phrase again in the speakers, "Let me in." It seemed that even the intonation did not change. It was just as indifferent and monotonous. And so, as soon as I had to hang up the phone, there was a strong blow below, echoing loudly in the darkness of the night. Judging by the sound, someone slammed the door with all the dope, and another 40 seconds later, the night darkness and calmness were cut through by some kind of mournful howl that was heard under my window. Of course, I remembered the urban horror story for a while, but the sound coming from the street was very difficult to call singing, as if someone were driving a fork on the glass, sometimes replacing it with foam. The strangest thing about this whole situation was not even that it all smelled of surrealism, but that the sound seemed to come from everywhere. It doesn't matter if my window is closed or not, whether I go into the bath, clamping my ears or putting on headphones at full volume, the nasty sound does not disappear anywhere and does not reduce the volume even by a decibel. The sound seemed to be broadcast directly to my head, and even more surprising was that after a while, this creak really began to remind me of singing, and I even began to distinguish words, although they were pronounced in some language unknown to me. What I initially took for a creak was a very high-pitched and hoarse voice at the same time, and so I began to distinguish the unknown dialect more and more clearly. My hands shook. My body became wadded. I did not understand the content, but there was so much sadness and pain in this song that tears wittingly welled up in my eyes. With my head I understood that contact with what was near the entrance did not bode well for me, but my heart was torn out, giving impulsive orders so that my hands would press the button to open the entrance door. In the end, I decided to resist as much as I could, biting myself and hitting my body, but there was no pain. I was in a trance, and my brain was the last link connecting me with the normal world. Meanwhile, the song got louder and the lyrics more staccato. Apparently the chorus began. My consciousness completely clouded and the sane part of me could only watch how my body approaches the intercom, stretches out my hand and presses the button to open the door with a trembling finger. Downstairs, the sound of a door opening and then slamming shut is heard, and the mood of the song becomes even more tragic. A few more minutes pass, during which I am breaking down like the last drug addict. Now a new order has been given to the body. It must open the front door. Finding the strength in myself, I tried to resist again and, having managed to briefly regain control of my body, decided to block my access to the landing. Grabbing the keys from the nightstand, I inserted them into the keyhole, turned them and, leaning on them with all my weight, broke off first in one and then in the other lock, because the inner one, on which I usually closed the door, could not be blocked. Someone or something apparently heard the fuss and the song gained momentum again, and I finally lost control of my body, which immediately reached out to unlock the door. Having opened the internal lock, I was about to pull the handle, but the door, closed for another 2 locks, of course, did not succumb. Turning the keys in my hands, my body threw them away and began to try to scratch the broken parts of the keys out of the lock with my nails. There was no pain, not at the moment when the pads of the fingers were torn against the iron lining of the lock, nor at the moment when the nails came off. There was no longer even fear as such. My consciousness simply looked at all this, incapable of emotions. Finally, apparently realizing that the door would not open, my body clung to the peephole, and that's when I saw it. There was something behind my door. Long limbs of a greenish color rested against the walls, floor, and ceiling. There were about 6 or 8 limbs, almost like a spider. However, the creature's body had nothing to do with arachnids. Greenish, covered with some kind of spots and indentations, almost oval in shape. A head departed from it. Yes, it was the head, and it apparently belonged to a once young girl, though now she did not look the best. Half of his face was peeled off, exposing rotting flesh. One eye was missing, and his teeth were a palisade of sharp, yellowish needles. The hair was tangled in a large ball. This something did not have hands as such. However, somewhere approximately in the middle of the oval body there were 2 smaller processes that ended in long spikes slightly bent inward. It is difficult to say why, but the thought immediately came to my mind that in front of me was something very ancient, something older than the first chronicles, something that should not be in the modern world. Kikimora surfaced somewhere in the mind. But the second thought was that there are no swamps near my house. Apparently, a dialogue with myself was growing inside my shocked mind. Or maybe I was just going crazy. And what if this something got hungry and went hunting? But why now? Why here? Why in this way? There were much more questions than answers, so my consciousness simply faded again. The creature sang all this time, increasing the power in his voice, if it could be called that. Now my body apparently had a new order, because it began to pound on the door with its hands and feet with all its might, until something crunched in the hand. Then my body moved to the end of the corridor and accelerated crashed into the door. Again there was an unpleasant crunch, this time somewhere in the area of the ribs. But there was no pain, and the body continued and continued to crash into the door. From behind the door itself came a hiss full of anger and discontent, and then a sharp spike pierced it, opening the thick metal like a can opener. The singing ceased, and I regained control of my body, and with it the pain. It was terrible. Overnight pain fell on me from broken bones and joints, torn nails and, as it turned out, a broken head. There was so much pain that the consciousness went out again, only now it is gone from the chanting. Well, in the meantime, the creature had already torn open half the door, apparently intending to still get inside. Another minute, and a significant part of the door trim fell into the apartment. This creature made its way into the apartment. Together with the creature, the smell of smoldering and decay, mixed with mustiness, made its way into the apartment. The creature was quite grinning and slowly approaching me, moving its limbs over all surfaces. Now it's getting closer to me, and with some misplaced irony, I thought this was the first time a city rumor had been so true. Then the creature opened its mouth. A long tongue came out, similar to a tentacle with one single suction cup at the end. This tentacle reached for my stomach, and leaning against it burned it with pain. But then the creature sharply pulled it back and bounced off me and disappeared into the entrance. Up the stairs there were quick receding slaps. The creature ran away, and now I'm already lying near the carved door all alone, realizing that I'm about to die from my injuries. My gaze slides along the wall and stumbles upon the clock. It shows 4:33, and dawn is emerging outside the window. Apparently this damned evil spirits are afraid of sunlight. A thought flashed through my fading consciousness. I came to myself in the hospital. A neighbor found me when she went out for a walk with her dog in the morning. Doctors fought for my life for 3 days, and in the end they still managed to save me. Thank God I'm alive and well. Nobody believes my testimony. They come up with a variety of versions, from a mental disorder to a robbery. Well, I know the truth. I know the whole truth and I'm afraid. I'm afraid that this creature will come back for me and finish what he started. In this case, I have a thick wooden pencil near the bed. I'll just simply deafen myself and pierce my ears, but stay alive.